All right, folks. Well, I think we'll start to get things underway as people gather here for our evening's programming. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Diamond, and I'm the Academic Director of the Integrated Marketing and Communications programs here at NYU School of Professional Studies in our Division of Programs and Business. And it's absolutely my delight to welcome all of you who are attending live, and then for future listeners and viewers who will be able to access the content via video as well. We've lined up a couple of things for you this evening. First is some introduction and information for those interested in our graduate programs in marketing and PR. And we'll be joined by a panel that my colleague Bonnie Bergen will introduce in a second. And then after that, we may have time for a couple of questions, but we also have a panel of professionals, alumni, students, faculty, etc., who we've invited to speak a bit more broadly about the power and the value of a marketing and PR education. And I'll give them some more direct introductions when we get to that section. So without further ado, welcome to everybody, and I'll hand it over to Bonnie.
Thanks, Michael. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bonnie Bergen. I'm the Assistant Director for the MS in Public Relations and Corporate Communication. And I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you all for being here. So I'm going to do a quick program and curriculum overview, go over our two graduate degree programs, the MS in Integrated Marketing and the MS in Public Relations and Corporate Communication. Then we have Jai Wen, who's from the Office of Admissions, who will speak to us about the application process. We have Kat here representing the advising team, who will talk a little bit more about what she and the other advisors do and give you a glimpse of the Wasserman Center for Career Development. And then finally, for our portion, we have Felicia Ong, who is a Public Relations and Corporate Communication student. We also call that program PRCC, it's just a little bit easier to say. And she's actually graduating this semester. So congratulations, Felicia. And she's going to talk to us a little bit more about her experience in the program as a student. Next slide, please. So it can be a little confusing. There's a lot of different departments and divisions within the school. So just to quickly give you an idea of where these two programs sit. So New York University is the larger university, and then within NYU, there's about 17 or 18 different schools, and we are part of the School of Professional Studies. And within what we call SPS, there's the Division of Programs and Business, also known as DPB. We love our acronyms here. And then within DPB, we are the two programs you can see, PRCC and IM, are part of the Department of Integrated Marketing and Communication. So just gives you kind of a better idea of where we sit within the larger university. Next slide. So you'll also probably hear us reference our student organizations. So each graduate program has a club that represents the students within the program. So for the MS in Integrated Marketing, we have the Integrated Marketing Association, and then the PR League is the club that represents the PRCC program here at NYU. So I just wanted to highlight some of the industry connection opportunities that our students are able to take advantage of. And I've just listed some of the events that our department has directly hosted. So this is in addition to all of the other events and offerings by the university. I won't read them all to you, but just so you can kind of get an idea of some of the direct industry events that our students have. And you can go to the next slide, Julia, because it does spill over a little bit. And I also wanted to point out that I have at the bottom of the screen the bit.ly link to our YouTube channel. So most of our events are recorded. So if anyone's interested in going and taking a look at some of the guest speakers or book talks that we've hosted in the past couple of years, we have those on our YouTube channel.
And Bonnie, if you might, I just pick up the conversation here. You know, I think if you have a chance to take a look at that, you'll notice that, you know, over the course of a year, we've had some extraordinary speakers. You know, the chairman and CEO of Edelman, one of the largest PR companies in the world, arguably. You know, folks from McDonald's, from Estee Lauder, from Nike, you know, a whole series of really important global brands. That's the kind of content, the kind of access, the kind of you know, quality of professional you know, insight and advice that students who join our programs are exposed to. So I think, and I would say, you know, even if Felicia was not here, she was the head of the PR League this year, that the PR League and the Integrated Marketing Associations are themselves the producers and curators of an enormous amount of very powerful co-curricular events, activities, and really extraordinary content. So, you know, it's a very, very vibrant place with respect to the kinds of professional interactions anyone contemplating a degree in you know, with us will get exposed to. So.
Yeah, and I also want to add to that again. So these two slides highlight the events that we've had in the last academic year. But again, if you go to our YouTube channel, we have other events that we've hosted, and we have different interviews with our faculty members are there as well. So there's a lot of really great content on our YouTube channel. I encourage everyone to check out. Next slide, Julia. And then I, of course, wanted to highlight our student organizations. And as Michael Diamond mentioned, Felicia Ong served as the president for the PR League this past year, so she can talk to you more about the student club events. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of the events that were hosted by our student clubs this year. The two largest being the IMA Student Summit, which focused on adapting through the unpredictable, and then the PR League Student Summit. They actually did their first ever hackathon, and I'll let Felicia talk a little bit more about that later. All right, so just getting into a little bit about the program structure. And again, a lot of this information is on the website. So I encourage you, if you wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive, you can check out the website. But just in general, so both programs are 14 courses for 42 total credits. So as a full-time student, it is 4 semesters. It's flexible, so you can take classes in the summer if you wanted to get it done in a year and a half, or you can take the 2 years. So each program has their core courses and then concentration courses, and then you'll round out the program with your capstone. So this is detail for the integrated marketing program, and then the next slide will show you for the public relations program. Similar setup, just a little bit different number of concentration courses, but otherwise pretty similar. And then one last thing I wanted to highlight is, as part of the concentration courses, students have the opportunity to take a 3-credit internship course. So this would replace one of the concentration courses, and it's just another opportunity for students to get direct industry exposure. And you can see we've listed a few recent internship examples. So just kind of highlighting the different and various organizations that our students have had the opportunity to partner with while they were students in the program. All right, so now I'm going to pass it off to Jai Wen, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about the application process.
Thanks, Bonnie. Hi, everyone. My name is Jai Wen Zhu. I work at the SPS Office of Admissions. So we're going to transition to talk about the admissions application process and our deadlines. So on our next slide, we have outlined the different deadlines for each of our semesters. For the upcoming fall 2021 semester, our application is still open for our domestic applicants. It is July 1st, 2021. We're also happy to announce that our spring 2022 application is now live on our website. The early action deadline for both international and domestic students is this coming September 15th. We also have final deadlines for international students of October 1st, and our domestic final deadline is November 30th. It typically takes the admissions committee about 3 to 6 weeks to render a decision once all application materials are received. Now let's talk about what's required to submit an application for our graduate application process. The first is the online application, which is available on our website at sps.nyu.edu. There's also a $150 application fee that needs to be paid in order to submit your application. We also require a detailed resume, which allows the admissions committee to better understand how the professional, the personal, the extracurricular, and any volunteer experiences that you have had shape you as a person and as a prospective student. For the integrated marketing program, applicants should provide a personal statement with a minimum of 500 words that should provide evidence of any achievements that may not be reflected in any other parts of your application. It should also present the professional and the life events that have influenced your decision to apply to grad school. For the public relations and corporate communications program, we require 2 essay prompts instead of 1 statement of purpose. We also require 2 letters of recommendation for the application. These can be from either academic or professional references who can speak to your work ethic, your character, and your potential for success at the graduate level. We do require college transcripts from every institution that you have attended. The admissions committee can review applications if you provide unofficial copies of your transcripts. However, if admitted, you will be required to submit official documents before you can enroll in classes. The final 3 requirements with the asterisk in front of them are for our international applicants. So first, any student who has attended any foreign or international college does need to have those credentials evaluated. And we require them to be evaluated for equivalency to the US educational system for admission and potential transfer credit purposes. Additionally, applicants who did not complete their undergraduate degree in the United States or in a country where the primary language of instruction is English are required to take either the TOEFL or the IELTS. The minimum recommended score is an 8.0 on the IELTS or a 110 or higher on the TOEFL. These scores are also listed on our website. Applicants who do not meet the minimum requirement for either the TOEFL or the IELTS will also be invited to participate in the Pearson's VEP test, which is just a supplemental English language proficiency exam. And that concludes our admissions requirements. Next, Kat Tartaglia will now speak about advising.
Muted. Thank you, Jawan. Hi, everyone. My name is Kat Tartaglia. I'm an academic advisor here at the Division of Programs and Business, representing a whole team of advisors. Slide, please. Thank you. So our mission at Academic Advising is to support students in successful and efficient degree completion while maximizing all the benefits and opportunities at NYU. So basically, we want you to enjoy your time here and make it to graduation with as little unnecessary added stress as possible. You know, your schoolwork or your job searching might get intense. So we're here to make sure you understand your academic plan, your program requirements, the policies and procedures that are relevant to you, what resources are available to you at NYU, and to advocate on your behalf. We can speak with you over the phone, in person, or of course now on Zoom in individual advising sessions. We offer many group advising sessions throughout the academic year that will be tailored to you, whether you are a new or continuing student. We also have walk-in hours weekly where you can speak to us without an appointment, and we host curricular events throughout the semester as well. Please. So I'm also going to speak a little bit about the Wasserman Center for Career Development. SPS is actually the only school at NYU that has its own dedicated career center. They can partner with you on starting from day one to help you reach your career goals. So just as you would make an advising appointment with me on Zoom, you can speak to a career counselor at Wasserman as often as you would like. They can review your resume, look over your LinkedIn, help you prep for interviews, and they'll also help you create a Handshake account. Handshake is NYU's internal job search system. It functions similarly to Indeed, but it's actually closed to members of the NYU community, and all the jobs were posted there specifically in search of NYU students. So that's a great additional resource to have, and something that I think is really special for SPS and NYU as a whole. Slide, please. Thank you. So this is kind of a deeper dive into what you can expect when working with a career counselor at Wasserman. Wasserman takes what they call a career wellness mindset approach to work. So it's more about creating a career that will give you lifelong satisfaction and have some longevity. nailing that first job after grad school is very exciting and definitely a priority for students, and they can help you get there. But they'll also help you reflect on what you want out of your career as a whole, what makes you feel fulfilled, and help you to search based on kind of those higher values and your deeper motivation. So I think that's really interesting, and I think it's something that is very healthy in this day and age. It's nice to have that perspective. Slide, please. So a little bit about our graduate career outcomes. This is the class of 2019. So 100% of PRCC graduates were employed full-time within 6 months of graduation. 92.7% of integrated marketing graduates were employed full-time within 6 months of graduation. 47.4% indicated that they obtained their position directly through an NYU or Wasserman related resource, and 48.4% received 2 or more job offers. Slide, please. Thank you. So here are some sample job titles for the MS in Integrated Marketing degree. These are kind of the starting roles or the early career roles that you can expect after completing your degree. And we have some sample employers listed as well. I will say, being an NYU alum myself, the NYU network in New York City is incredibly strong, and people are very open and supportive of one another. So wherever you go, in any industry in New York, you will find a fellow NYU alum there. I can definitely say that. Slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit about the MS and PRCC graduate career outcomes. Here are some more sample job titles that you can look forward to, and a few sample employers as well. I will also say that SPS classes are actually located in the Midtown Center, which is an incredible location for both marketing and PR. You'll share a building and the area around Bryant Park with some of the most important firms worldwide, globally. So you're right there physically in the same space with them, and it's easy to kind of make those connections, go on interviews once you're here. Slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to pass it over now to our student representative, Felicia, to talk a little bit more about the student experience.
Great, thanks, Catherine. I just wanted to share with everyone a little bit about me and kind of my story and what my NYU experience has been like. And so actually a number of prospective students have always asked me, what is it that brought you to NYU? And for me, I actually came all the way from California. I chose to come to grad school with the hopes of actually making a career change. And so I previously worked in fundraising, did a lot of development work, and I was often asked by my corporate partners to secure placements or manage their storytelling and their press. And I, 21, 22-year-old me coming straight out of college, didn't really know what I was doing half the time. And I felt like, being able to engage in a master's program like what NYU had offered would really give me that foundational skills, and the confidence to succeed in the work that I was doing. And so I actually did the program in 3 years. I was doing it part-time while working full-time. Bonnie mentioned I am graduating. I officially finished my last class this week. And overall, I've just, really enjoyed, I think, the practical skills that this program has given me, especially in terms of, things like writing a press release. How do you really pitch something to the media? How do you put together a strategic communications plan? Those are all things that I've used in my role and in my new role, actually. And something that actually, one thing I did want to touch on was the connections that I've made with the industry and especially our professors. And I think one of the most valuable experiences for me have been classes where we've actually got to work on projects for real clients that our professors have brought in for us. I actually had a social media class where our professor brought in a client, like a friend of his from his network, to match with every single one of us, of the students in his class. And so we all had our own personal, private client, and our final was to produce a social media plan for that particular client. And so really getting a sense of what it's like in the real world is kind of like what I tell people high level that I think this program has really done for me. And then in terms of student life, Bonnie mentioned the PR League as the student organization representing PR PRCC students in the program. And I just, highly encourage anyone who's coming into the program to get involved in student life. Definitely reach out to your advisor or to, any student representatives you can come across to learn more. But whether it's, a club or other groups on campus, it's kind of my way that I've been able to make lifelong friends. Many of you probably can assume I did half my program online because of COVID. And, even then I've been able to make the closest of friends through this program, even though we're all graduating virtually. And so highly recommend getting involved if you can. And, being in student organizations like the PR League is really kind of what's allowed me to develop, I would say, PR experience on top of my work experience. There's so many times where we've worked with community partners, whether you're working with colleagues, but you're all bringing kind of these events to life. And we have this joke internally at PR League that we're almost like a mini company, and it really challenges us to think about how we take everything we've learned in the classroom and, okay, like, how do we get people to our events? How do we really, what's our plan to really bring these things to life to get people excited about, the events or the work that we're doing? And so I kind of see it as this opportunity to take, especially if you're in the PR or the IM program, everything that we've learned at school, you can kind of now use it to give back to your community. And so kind of, overall, it's been a great experience at NYU, and I actually just started a new role a few months ago to lead PR and communications for the CEO and executive team for a global nonprofit called build.org, focused on youth entrepreneurship. So really excited that, I'm kind of graduating in a couple of days and leaving NYU with the intention that I had a couple of years ago to think about, how I can leverage skills that I learned through this program to really carry my career forward. I will hand it, I believe I'm handling it back to Bonnie or Michael.
Yeah, well, fantastic, Felicia. Thank you so much for your comments. I think you represent, really the finest of what we have seen in our students, and your level of engagement and, your willingness to take on challenges. In passing, I think Bonnie mentioned the hackathon, and I'm fond of telling this story because when Felicia came to me and suggested, that the PR League wanted to do this hackathon, and they had essentially 2 or 3 weeks to pull it all together, and it sounded incredibly ambitious to me. I definitely had my doubts, but she and her colleagues pulled off an amazing, very, in some senses, typical NYU SPS event where we, the students were working directly for a client, working on a social media initiative, and that was being judged by Ogilvy PR and their senior executives. So it was a very much a sort of real live, project, as they say, learning that's steeped, transformative learning that's really steeped in real world applications, which is very much our motto. So, all right, gang, I'm going to see if there are any questions. I don't see any popping up. If any folks who are specifically interested in, some more information about the degree, might try and take a couple of quick questions now, and you'd have to do that by typing in the Q&A, which I realize is a little more cumbersome when you're on your phone than if you're sitting at a desktop. But if anybody does have questions more specifically about the degree program, and maybe Bonnie, actually, you can go back. There's a slide with everybody's emails and addresses. I think if you can go back to that one, just leave that up for a second. In the deck, I think there was one that, I think it's worth.
Go forward, Julia. I had it hidden, but now it's not hidden. If you go forward to the second to last slide.
Great. Yeah, let's just.
Oh.
But anyway, so what I'll encourage you, I think the easiest way is, Jay, if you tell me what the URL, the alias is, we'll get the alias out to folks. As we can stick it in the chat, but encourage anybody to reach out if there are no immediate questions. We'll proceed with the rest of the program. But the key thing is the website is phenomenal. Has lots of information on the website. Google NYU School of Professional Studies Integrated Marketing and PR, and you will get there. The YouTube channel has all of our content from a number of the events we've hosted and panels we've hosted, and so that's another great place to educate yourself about the program. and we invite any students or potential students, to meet with faculty or meet with other students, or even potentially during the summer to sit in quote unquote in a Zoom class or something like that. So please, feel free to be out in contact with us. So, and Bunny has just put the alias in the chat, which should hopefully, if you can pick that up, great. And if not, we're going to get both a copy of this deck and contact information out once the session is over. So, all right, I'm going to just double check Q&A. I don't see anyone raising hands or asking questions at this stage, so I'm going to jump in. Thank you, Felicia and Gia and Bonnie and Kat. You are welcome to stay, of course, but we're going to probably transition now into sort of a slightly broader conversation, which I thought would be of some interest to all of you on this webinar this evening and those listening later. Around the broader question of what's the value or what's the power or impact of a formal education in marketing and PR. And it's a much discussed subject, and I'm sure we're going to cover some of the pros and cons arguments either way. But I'm going to ask our panelists to come off, to turn their videos back on now, if we can, and then I'll do super quick intros to each of you, and then we'll jump into some questions, and we'll leave some time as well for attendees who want to have additional questions. Let me just handle one question that came in, still related to the information sessions. Jason asks, and I think Bonnie or whoever stayed on, Gia, if you stayed on, if we get more admissions related questions, please feel free to answer them in the Q&A. But Jason had a quick question about in the fall, is it optional for students who want to take classes online or in person? In the fall of 2021, following the direction that the state and the city and many other institutions are moving, our plan is to be substantially in person. So the vast majority of our courses and programming will likely be in person. There will be some courses offered online. There's some selected courses offered online, but the vast majority of the program will be offered in person. So I think it would probably not be accurate to say that you can sort of select to do it either online or in person. I think it's more the goal, at least at this point, hopefully everything is stable and indeed progressing positively with COVID, that will be substantially in person with some online programming. So, okay, so I will move in. So we're really honored today to be joined by three people I can consider in various 6 degrees of friendship, I guess, or at least acquaintance, however bold I want to be here. But Dr. Lillian Ajayi-Orr has been a remarkable resource for her students and for our program now for a number of years. Very impressive individual who represents the school well and has had a great impact on her students. She's a data scientist, a marketing strategist, an entrepreneur, and founder of a group called the Global Connections for Women, a foundation, among many other distinctions, recent doctorate from UPenn among them. So absolutely delighted to welcome Lillian. Laura Zahodi is now the head of marketing at Mother-in-Laws, and she will tell us a lot more about that, I'm sure, along the way, or at least what she learned at NYU SPS is applied. She was a student in our master's in integrated marketing, and I had the very distinct pleasure of having her as a student in my capstone course. The capstone course is the final sort of project that all students work on, and she had a remarkable project around edible cannabis products, which of course intrigued all of us. Jim Joseph is the president for North America for McCann Health, a very experienced executive, both on the marketing and the PR sides, also serves as the chair of the PR Council, which represents PR agencies, and teaches in our integrated marketing program as well. And then Annie Scranton, who is the founder and president of a very first growing impactful PR firm called Pace Public Relations, and is an alum of our program from an earlier graduating year from the program, and we may entice her back to teach as well. So absolutely delighted to have all four of you together to kind of address this issue. So let me jump in and ask you this question, which I think many probably students who are thinking about a degree, a master's in marketing or PR, ask themselves, which is, why would I do a master's in marketing and PR at NYU rather than trying to do an MBA? So I'm going to ask, maybe I'll ask Jim, if you don't mind kicking off, and then we'll bat that one around a little bit. So thoughts about, sort of what you see as some of the differences or the advantages perhaps of what we would call a functional master's over an MBA.
So interesting question as someone who got an MBA back in the day, and then someone who teaches a functional master's in the present day. Let's face it, there's merits to both. Education is education. I'm a firm believer in education. I'm even a firm believer in education for education's sake. I just think it's always good to be learning. I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. The functional master's, in my view, is much more subject matter specific. It's building out a subject matter expertise that you might find useful in your career. It is probably a bit more pragmatic, a bit more real world, a bit more set to what your job will actually be when you finish the degree. Whereas in my view, an MBA is a bit broader, more generalist, more, folks will probably kill me for this, more theoretical, as opposed to day-to-day. Both have merits, both have benefits. It all depends on what you're looking to accomplish with the education. Get prepared for a job, jump right in, or just sort of learn in more general ways.
Annie, maybe I'd call on you just for some additional perspective from a PR perspective. I don't know whether when you were thinking about your degree at NYU you were considering an MBA or not, but you've navigated in that world with lots of different types of business executives. Any thought of how students might think about the trade-offs?
I mean, I agree with a lot of what Jim just said. It kind of depends on what your goals are. For me personally, I was already 8 years into owning my own business when I elected to enroll in NYU's PR program. I think I could have, just speak from my own experience, I think I could have benefited from an MBA in a lot of ways, but getting classical, more advanced training in PR certainly did benefit me as a business owner, because it opened my eyes to different services we could offer, different ways that we could scale and grow our business in terms of our client relationships and outreach and different types of clients that we choose to work with. So I think there are benefits to both, but if your passion is public relations, media, writing, like being immersed in sort of that day-to-day, then I think opting for the PR route is going to ultimately serve you better and prepare you better for that track in your career.
Let me build on that question then perhaps and ask Laura, you're a relatively recent graduate from our program, and then I'll ask Lillian for her perspective on this. Is what do you see as some of those advantages perhaps that students emerge from these programs into the workplace? So if you put yourself, obviously you have a degree in marketing now from us, and how do you feel sort of somewhat better equipped, if that's a fair question?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think when you graduate from a more kind of practical functional program, you do learn a lot of new systems and tools that when you go into a business, businesses have their own structures, right? No business is the same. And you're able to kind of go in and see like, oh, I actually know about some other tools or, ways that we could organize this. And that's really helpful and useful if you have the soft skills to implement that too. So don't neglect the soft skills. You can't go into a company and just blow it up. But you will know a lot and a lot more than people expect of you. And to be honest, that's how you get promoted in the workplace, right? You don't get promoted by doing your job that you were hired to do. You get promoted by doing your job and some extra projects on the side, right? That's how you get noticed in a business. And so by having some more skills and knowledge outside of, you know, just what your boss is teaching you, that's how you can get promoted within the organization relatively quickly.
So clearly sort of hitting the ground running, some specific skills, tools, technology. Lillian, how do you think about, you know, you've had also the benefit now of thinking about this as a chief learning officer as well, you know, what's your way of passing through, you know, the kind of skills that students in the program indeed that you teach in, you know, graduate with?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with everything that everyone has said so far. You know, both of them are equally valuable, but the best way that I would, you know, using my CLO hat, I think the MBA teaches you how to build a business, build a process. And what the master's degree, especially in marketing or PR, it kind of teaches you about ways to sustain the business model, because you're going to need either or. There are builders and then there are people who execute. And I think one of the best things about a master's program, particularly the SPS program, is that you get a lot of exposure. So I teach, you know, as part of the master's in data analytics. And I think one of the cool things about that is that my students can take classes on PR. My students can take classes on, everyone has to take a capstone. So you learn how to build businesses anyway. And I think a lot of students become entrepreneur from that. You learned a lot of soft skills and hard skills. Going back to Laura's point, you're going to need that. And then I think at the end of the program, you have a choice to make. And I think when you get an MBA degree, you have this energy to go build your own company, even when you're not ready. Whereas a master's program help you kind of re-navigate what your career should be like. So in terms of your professional development goals, in terms of your aspiration, I want to learn first. So therefore, I want to re-engage by going to a company and helping them design specific programs and content strategy, or even helping them understand consumer behavior by looking at their data to create informed decision on how to elevate the business and create impact in the marketplace. So I think that's how I see it. Is the difference is MBA is about building a business. And then the marketing master's degree is really about sustaining the business and really giving it that thought leadership so they can drive forward and make the goals.
So I want to maybe pick up on that theme of both execution, you know, that you spoke about, and then also some of the specific skills. And I'm wondering, maybe ask Annie here, you know, you were a student here and you've spoken about, you know, your particular context of starting your own business and growing your own business. Were there one or two sort of skills that you felt were absolutely critical that you learned as a student, or more generally, you think students need to leave with from the programs?
Well, the number one skill, in my opinion, across the board is writing. If you don't have good writing skills, then you're not going to go very far in the PR profession, since every single pitch that we put out there is an email written pitch. Nobody really talks on the phone that much anymore, at least in my world. Reporters don't love to be called randomly at all times of the day. So we keep it to emails. And I think, like, you know, for me, writing is one of those things that before going into this program, I was like, I'm a great writer. I know how to do it. I can do it in my sleep. But you know, learning is a lifelong process. And so you always learn new things. And I think, just like for me, just taking different classes, whether it was in government relations or pertaining to just different verticals that we may not be as immersed in as other verticals, learning just tips and tactics in terms of writing, I think was really helpful. So to me, that was a skill set that I felt strongly that I excelled in, but that I improved upon after being in this class, and that every single day I reap the benefits of that. And I think too, just like there was a lot of collaboration with myself and small groups of students in many of my classes. And I think that just generally speaking, it's a good exercise in how to communicate with others. How are you going to potentially communicate with your clients? How are you going to work with different kinds of personalities? And, you know, who's going to be in charge? Who's going to be, you know, more of the take on other aspects of the project? So to me, that was really interesting, because in the early part of starting my business, it was just me. So I was used to doing so much on my own. This is before I had a staff. And so it was that aspect, I think, is just really critical, because at most agencies, you are in a team and you strive to be very collaborative in the nature amongst your peers, but also with your clients as well.
Jim, I wonder in the marketing area, you know, one of the sort of much talked about skills is the idea of insight development, you know, and you, I imagine, spend a lot of your time sort of leading teams to help them build insights for, or actionable insights for clients. Is that a skill you can teach in class? And do you think, you know, any thoughts about how you're equipping students for that kind of capacity?
Absolutely. I always say that none of us were born marketers or born strategists. It's not an innate skill by any means. Writing maybe is for some, although I will tell you that I was a horrible writer. Horrible. I had to really work on it, and now I write all the time. So we're not born to know what an insight is, or how to find an insight, or how to develop a strategy. It takes years and years and years of practice, and that's exactly what we do in my class here at NYU. Is we practice and practice and practice. And I beat the drum. I see a few of my students on this webinar. I beat the drum of what's the emotional benefit, what's the insight, what's the brand positioning, we beat that drum every single class, because the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more you recognize what is a fact about a demographic group versus an insight about how they feel or how they behave, or how they might change their behavior based on your marketing to them. So it's a learned skill, and the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you love it, actually.
Yeah, I would love to explore this idea of you know, the balance perhaps between some of the soft skills and the hard skills. And I know you know, all of you have spoken at some level about, you know, that not necessarily the stuff that you can learn in a textbook, let's put it that way, whether it's you know, about human psychology, or whether it's about data, or whether it's about brand architecture, or how to write a press release. These are things which arguably you can learn not so necessarily only from a textbook, but you can learn in a more formal way. But you know, it's often said that, you know, to really learn how to navigate in a company and pick up some of those softer sort of social skills, you can only learn them on the job, so to speak. I think when I was growing up in the UK, they used to talk about the University of Hard Knocks. That was the phrase. Maybe it made its way over here, or the University of Life. You know, Laura, you more recently of crew have emerged into you know, into the workspace, and I wondered if you might comment about whether you think that's true, that, you know, the only way to learn some of these things is on the job, or whether there were opportunities to, you know, start to develop some of these skills navigating professionally whilst you were at NYU SPS.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I did come to SPS with a pretty significant amount of work experience. So I already knew what it was like to function within an office. And I think because of that, I did take away different things from students who were younger than me. I think if you're coming at it with only like 1 year of work experience, or if you're coming out of your undergraduate degree, there's a lot that you can learn in a master's program about getting along with other people. You know, there's a lot of presentations, there's a lot of group work, that kind of thing. And you're dealing with projects that are, you know, insight driven, and people have different ideas, right? Like, oh, well, you know, I think this is the insight. No, I think this is it. Well, in the real world, you only have the budget for one campaign. So you need to figure it out, right? As a team. One thing I do think about the University of Hard Knocks, or like University of Life, though, I think that as someone who started in the creative side of marketing, I think that in order to be creative, you do need to go out and have life experiences, right? You can't be creative by sitting in your house and doing nothing. You really do need to go out into the world and have those experiences and bring that to your work. But in terms of, learning how to be around people or learning hard skills by just being out in the world, I mean, that's kind of difficult when you're talking about specific type of work and projects. I think there's also a certain vernacular to marketing work, and when you speak the same language as other people, you become a better communicator and you're able to sell your ideas more easily, right? So if you understand how to talk about a marketing project with your boss, who also understands how to talk about a marketing project, you're going to get further than if you're, if you don't understand that vocabulary.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting observation, actually, and probably one that is, not as well understood. I tend to agree with you. I think that there's a balance, and I maybe explore this a bit with Lillian and Annie, between, we talk a lot in the program, and I'm happy for you guys to generalize. Obviously, it's not just about NYU, it's about the value of an education in this field. But we talk a lot about the distinction perhaps between the knowing what and the knowing how. So, the knowing what, I think, is some of the theory that Jim was referencing, to some extent the vocabulary, but it's the knowing how is really knowing when to use those things and how to apply them. That's one of the things we've been trying to sort of work on in our program specifically. And I do think a graduate education over a year or two gives you an opportunity to test some of those things out in a safer environment. So I know, Lillian, if you have some thoughts about that sort of duality about knowing what or knowing how, or Laura's point about, learning the vocabulary of marketing and PR.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do in my web analytics course, just to kind of open my students' eyes to, why the class is structured the way it is, why the program is structured the way it is I go through the World Economic Forum report on top skills. And on that report, and I picked out a couple of research questions that they had and what the report was all about. And my students, they see things like collaboration, they see analytical skills, they see problem solving skills, they see, all type of skill set that, typically they would have taken advantage of. And then it also shows you the report on skill set that are actually depleting, that the world don't necessarily need anymore. And then we come to the question of whether or not, what's the difference between humans versus machines and what skill set? Because then there's like, I do a test thing where I'm like, all right, how many of you think that, by certain year, what percentage of the job market will have machine taking their jobs? And it's nice to see all the questions that come up and the percentages that my students come up with. And I think what I tell them is that, the good news is that machine will never take over our jobs, because one, you have to continue to further your education, you have to build your skill set. And then there are some emotional factors that human beings just possess, the machine, no matter how well you program them, that they will never have. So I think it's important that, when I do that, and then I think the next class I start to introduce them into their different groups, there's a little bit more empathy on, my God, like whatever skill set that I bring. So I like how Laura and Annie talked about group activity, which is a big important aspect of how we teach, learning by doing. They see the value and they come out of it being more effective as a team player as well as a team leader. And then one of the things that I end the semester with is I ask them a question of, what did you discover about yourself, and like what was your skill set that you really felt like was actually something that you brought in every day and every time that we met, either in class or in groups. And it's nice to see, like, some people say, hey, I'm not the leader of the group. I am, my strong suit is more of the strategy. My strong suit is more of the creative side of things. And I think having that juxtaposition between, hard skills and soft skills, and as educators, figuring out a way to blend that into how we teach our students and the exercises that we give them, is very special. And I, not to speak so highly of NYU, but I think NYU does a fantastic job of really bringing in experts and allowing thought leaders in this space to come and teach our students the real life experience of what their day-to-day is going to be like, and enforcing them to learn those habits ahead of them getting a job in the marketplace.
Annie, I don't know if this was true, but I imagine when you were here as a student, you had kept your business alive. Yes, you were working probably pretty hard. So did you find some space, or many students who go through perhaps more of an undergraduate experiences, they do feel like they had this chance to expand their mind and explore things that they wouldn't have had a chance to do. So did you have that opportunity, and did it create some space for you, or do you remember it more as kind of heads down and get the assignments done? So
I mean, when I feel like I was kind of an untraditional SPS PR degree student, because I was probably like 34 or something when I started, and by the end of it I graduated when I was 7 months pregnant with my daughter. So I remember a lot of my students being much younger and sort of going right from undergrad into graduate school, but for me, like, the hands down, the absolute coolest experience that I gained from NYU was being able to travel through one of the many programs that it doesn't matter which exact school you're in, you can still apply to go away. And I got to go to Cuba through NYU and go for 10 days and just immerse in the culture and learn all sorts of things about businesses, the future of tourism there. And to your point, it certainly opened my eyes to think bigger in terms of like the types of clients or work that I may be interested in doing, whether that was internationally or with, more of an emerging nation, and just kind of like realizing that there are more opportunities out there in the world to really grab hold of just than here in New York City, where I'm based. But also just on a personal level, being able to go to Cuba and have the privilege of learning, and being guided around and with real, experts and through different classes down there was something I'll never forget. So just, putting that out there, that I think NYU does a great job of, rounding out the education in a way that, is not just like, okay, here's what your 9-to-5 job is going to be, but thinking bigger, thinking globally, and trying to put all those pieces together.
yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point to make, that a lot of the benefit of a university education comes from your access to other resources and other opportunities that are perhaps outside of the field. We are fond, and we should probably sort of quantify this a bit more. Anyone who has the privilege of having spent time either in person at the Bobst Library, or these days more accessing those resources online, will soon realize the enormous value of the various different databases and collections they have to you as a professional. So I think, I can't remember the number, I think the number was $25 million, that the street value of the content, for example, the databases like Mintel, or all of the collected works from the Cannes Lions, or all the various ad spender and media spending reports, all these various tools that or sort of e-marketer sources of data that in our professional life, perhaps if you work for a big company, they may be out of resource, but you'll have access to those things as well. So I think that's it's a good point to it's good to point that out, that an academic degree it gives you access to some of these extraordinary resources. Jim, I wonder in that context whether you might comment, and you're on the hiring side, and in the very heart of this actually is there's a number of alternative outlets for education, let's put it that way, these days. So everybody's probably familiar with Coursera and MOOCs more generally. Google, we know, has been making a pretty aggressive move into some of the skills like project management or data analytics even. How do you see those types of initiatives in the context of or in comparison to a broader, longer graduate degree?
I mean, I do like to see candidates that are determined and that are constantly trying to learn and improve their craft and assertive about, honing their skills. I view those kinds of programs as very good, and part of an ongoing learning development that any of us as people and as professionals should be on. They don't replace something like what we offer here or an MBA. They are additional. They are fine tuning. They are continuing education almost, where you might stay on a learning curve. You might learn the latest and greatest. You might hear a different perspective from a different angle of a different industry, but they don't replace. They certainly don't replace a more comprehensive, all-encompassing overview, whether it's for a subject matter expertise specifically, or even something more broad. They don't replace that, but it's great to see that people are, when I see candidates that are doing those kinds of certificate programs or whatever we might call them, I find it impressive that they want to keep continuing their skills and better themselves.
Yeah. Any thoughts from other panelists about some of those things? Maybe you've experienced them yourself, or Google obviously took a very hard line on all of this. I think the quote I saw from their, sort of head of corporate affairs, who said something along the lines of, let me see if I can quote him. He said, "In our own hiring, we'll now treat these new career certificates," so Google offered some career certificates, "as the equivalent of a 4-year degree for related roles." Annie, do you think that's a trend that catching on, or Laura, any concerns about that?
I have feedback on that.
Yep.
So when I graduated from NYU, my first role was actually at a performance marketing agency. So that's what we did, is Google search, shopping, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Bing, all of that. I spent 6 months in a full-time job learning about that. And that still wasn't enough. That stuff is always changing. So, I mean, when Google issues a certificate, I think it's really good to get it and learn about it, but until you're actually in the platform managing a significant enough budget for a client, you are not going to learn the features on that baby. Those platforms are heavy. There's so much more that feeds into them. Like, what about the creative pipeline? What about measurement? And you're not learning anything about that through the certificates. And it really is muscle memory, right? I mean, when you're going through and you're building campaigns, you don't get fast at that without practice. And I think it'll take you about 6 months in a full-time job to become proficient in Google ads and Facebook ads, to get really good at it. So that's my opinion on that.
Annie, any additional thoughts? Then we'll go to.
So, sorry.
Let's go to Annie first, and we'll go back to Lillian.
I was going to add.
I don't really have too much to add. I mean, listen, I think like whatever you do to get more education, go for it. Like, it's never going to hurt you, hopefully. But I think that most traditional employers value a traditional degree. And maybe that's too traditional of me, but I just think that still holds a lot of water, and at least amongst the people that I sort of work with and deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. Lillian, sorry, you probably have some good perspective on this, and you think about these things a lot, I know.
Yeah, so no, when Laura was talking, she reminded me of a bunch of my students, because my class, they have to use Google Analytics, so I really encourage them to get certified. So when you were talking, I immediately thought about my students right away. One thing I wanted to say is learning agility is a thing. And especially because of the pandemic and the impact that it has on employability, we have a lot of foreign students on our campuses as well. And so there was a lot of there's a little bit of setbacks that happened with just our students trying to career plan. And one of the things I said to them is use this was in 2020. So I want to predate it for sure. The advice that I did give them was, this is a time to add more to your skills and up skills in a more specialized way. So that way you can really stand out in terms of applying for position, because as you guys all know, unemployment rate was at the all-time high in the last year. And even now we're still recovering. So I told my students that in addition to getting your master's and your degrees, it doesn't hurt to upskill by getting these certificates. And it really just sends a message to your employer, your potential employer, that you are someone who values knowledge and you love to acquire it, and that you use this time to really improve yourself and your skills. So that was something that just kind of popped in my head that I wanted to immediately share, hence the excitement earlier.
Yeah, well, I think what I'm hearing you saying, all of you, is that it's important to be, naturally curious and a lifelong learner, and add to your store of skills. B, that these programs, like Google certificates or indeed the certifications in the Google Analytics or HubSpot or whatever it is, are not a replacement. They're not a substitute for a graduate degree, but they are complementary to, or they're additive. They're things that you can layer on top. They're clearly a lot less expensive and in some cases free, I think, even. So I wonder if the panel, and maybe we'll make this potentially the sort of last formal set of questions, and then see if there are any Q&A from the audience, or invite you guys to comment as you feel. But my question is it's sort of challenging and a broad one, but I guess if you had a niece or nephew, let's say that was the way it was posed to me once. If you had a niece or nephew and you were helping them think through, how to justify the expense of an education at NYU, which, or any of the leading schools, in the States, we have lots of colleagues and other programs around the States or outside of the US that certainly provide a very good, solid graduate education in marketing and PR, but they're all likely to be relatively expensive. So what do you think is sort of the calculus, or how do you think about the ROI of this investment that we ask students to make, or in many cases you've made yourselves?
I can go first. I think that the real value for me and for many will be the connections that you make there. Your peers and your classmates will go on to have amazing careers that, they may want to partner with you on, or bring you in on, or consult for. I have gained clients from professors at NYU. I have hired many interns in my company from people I've worked with at NYU, and connections through there. And there's not really a value on growing your network, because your network is everything in terms of, just continuing on in your success and evolving and all that sort of stuff. So the expense is real for sure. But I think that, if you're looking at it long term, it is like, if you really put into it, as much as you can, the return in terms of the education and the connections will likely very much exceed that.
Yeah, and I'll jump in also and say that when I got my MBA a long time ago, the financial ROI was extremely linear and very easy to calculate. You knew when you graduated with an MBA in marketing, you were going to make $20,000 more per year with the MBA than without it. So the math was really simple. So you basically paid back your MBA in 2 years. So you could easily justify financing, you could easily justify cash flow. Now, in my mind, the ROI is no longer linear. It's no longer financial, honestly, because I don't know that you can make that very simple connection to increased salary upon graduation with this program versus without it. So the financial ROI, I don't think, is relevant. What is relevant, in addition to the connections, which is definitely important, but what is relevant is how you learn, how you expand your mind, how you're able to apply your learnings to many different kinds of situations, how you can navigate your career, how you can make choices in what you want to do, how you might pivot to something different, how you might pivot back to something different again. You learn that, you gain those skills in programs like this, that you're not going to just get if you jump into a job. You'll get great on-the-job training, you'll get very specific knowledge of what that job's about, but you're not going to get the broad spectrum learning, mind expanding stuff that you get with this kind of a program. That's not financially based. That's a different kind of ROI in my mind.
Yeah, and it speaks to, I think, perhaps to Lillian's point about learning agility as well. You know, that's perhaps one of the skill sets that you're not at least ostensibly purchasing, but you actually learn that that's one of the critical skills you'll pick up, I guess.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on this question, Laura? It looks like maybe you wanted to comment.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything that's been said. For me, there were two factors too, in terms of measuring the ROI. So I came to the master's program and I chose to do the data analytics stream, which was very outside of my wheelhouse coming from a creative background, but I came to NYU with the intent of doing that. So I'd never had any kind of background in quant before. I had a mentor at the first agency I worked at. Her name was Joanne, shout out, she was amazing. And she taught me as much as she could about data analysis because she'd made her career in that, but there's only so much that you can learn at work. You're not gonna learn applied statistics at work. You can learn that at NYU, and it has been so valuable to me in terms of even just my confidence in applying for certain roles, right? Like in order to move up past where I was already in management at an agency. I needed to understand quant, right? In order to be a head of marketing or like a director, you need to understand you're the one running the P&L, you're the one running the ROI analysis, looking at ROAS on your ads, like CAC models, lifetime value models. You're the one looking at spins and IRI and finding insights. And in order to move up, I just needed to know that stuff. And so this was an opportunity for me to do that in a pretty safe learning environment, and in a very integrated way that I could plug into my work experience. Did I learn some things that I don't always use at work? Well, of course, there's some, very math-based stuff that you don't use, but a lot of the stuff I honestly still use it. So for me, it was mind expanding, confidence boosting, and there was a financial element to it too, to help me move up in my career.
Fantastic. I think that captures it beautifully. So I'm going to ask the audience if there are any questions that they want to pitch. Use the Q&A button down below, and I'll see them and I'll try and field them. But in the interim, I wonder if each of you could possibly just share, maybe one insight you gained either as a student or perhaps that you teach as a teacher that you think has probably had the most profound impact on you as a career, in terms of your professional career. So, so those of you who teach, perhaps it's more about, what you find really resonates, and you have that lovely light bulb or aha moment from students, or they tell you years later, that, I'm so pleased. And then for the, Annie and Laura, who were students with us, was there a moment like that at all? And you've spoken to some of this, so let's I'll start with Lillian, if that's okay. Is there something you find consistently amazes and delights your students, or they come back and tell you later that it had an impact?
Yeah, no, I think it boils down to something that I think Laura said earlier about building confidence. It's funny because like when you go into a master's program or you teach in a master's program, you don't even think that confidence was something that your students were dealing with. And I think the aha moment for me is, hearing from my students that they feel more comfortable with working with data, more comfortable coming up with digital marketing strategies, and really having more of a control over the outcome of their own lives. And I think that's something that we don't necessarily always talk about, but it's nice when my students share that. And those moments gives me those aha moments, because I'm glad that I've contributed to that and that we have a program that allows students to take control over their own future.
Excellent. Annie, maybe was there a moment of insight or on reflection, you now realize that you found the key or turned the key in the lock at some point during your 2 or 3 years here with us?
I mean, I don't think I had that big of an epiphany at NYU, but I will say that like one thing I wanted to mention earlier, for my line of work, a lot of what we do is very news reactive, and pitching clients based on the news cycle. And the way that I learn the best is by real examples of something that's actually taking place. And I remember many, many courses at NYU where we would not just have a hypothetical situation of how would you handle this PR. It's like, no, what's happening in the news right now? What do we think they did right? What did they do wrong? Let's break it down. And I think in that context, you marry the real world experience with the actual, theory behind how to make it all work. And I think for me, that was the biggest takeaway, because you're able to really understand and see, okay, this is how I would work through an issue. This is how I would go promoting it in a tangible and very real and accessible way.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think there's I've come to call that the moldy burger problem, which will probably date this video, but for those of you who are familiar with Burger King's campaign, there was a very famous campaign last year where they showed a burger slowly molding over of course, I think 28 days or something like that. And their point obviously was how fresh the meat was, but it became the thing that everybody was talking about, and it was a great example in class to talk about, does it work, does it not? And there are obviously many more like that today with social justice issues and how active companies need to be in the discussion. So I'm going to leave the last any comment from you, Jim, about any aha moments or light going off, or certainly you've had the history with us and have stayed in touch with a lot of your students. You may hear some of that back from them. So
I think for me, the aha moment that I then have leveraged every semester in the classes I teach is the ability to work in groups, and work in groups of people that come from very different backgrounds, very different sets of experiences, very different skills, different work ethics, different approaches, and being able to find a way to work together and solve a problem. And even if on the surface, it feels like there's no way you can work with these people, you're never going to accomplish your goal, it's never going to happen, or all the work's going to fall on you because no one else is doing anything, you still find a way to manage it and work through it. And to me, that's something I teach in my class. I force a lot of groups that don't know each other, because that's what happens in the real world. You get thrown into project teams that change all the time. You don't always know everybody. A lot of people you haven't worked with before. They're not your friends. They might not think like you do, which is a good thing. So you've got to be able to just pick it up and run with it, and even adjust your style. That's something we all have to do on a day-to-day basis. You might work with 5 different groups in any one given day. So that's an aha I've had a long time ago. It's a skill I try to teach through repetitive learning in my class.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I cannot thank you all enough. We covered quite a lot of waterfront here in this conversation, and I'm sure those listening in or those to be listening in the future will appreciate your thoughts and reflections. Again, I want to encourage anybody who's interested in learning more. Simplest probably way to do this is to Google NYU SPS Integrated Marketing and Communications. But you should be able to find us there or on YouTube and some other outlets, and encourage you all in your lifelong journey. And as I think Aristotle said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I have some sympathy for that point of view, but at least the idea of staying intellectually curious and engaged. And I couldn't think of a better way to spend an evening than with these 4 delightful people. So Lillian, Annie, Laura, and Jim, many, many thanks. And we'll sign off for now.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Thank you. Bye.